This episode of The Envelope is brought to you by HBO Max's Emmy Award-winning Best Comedy Series, Hacks.
Now, when we met over coffee, I quickly realized that Mikey was not in any way typecast. Very different from the roles she had played.
But that's cereal.
Hello and welcome to The Envelope. I'm Kelvin Washington. Happy to be here with you alongside Yvonne Villarreal, also Mark Olson. Looking forward to have a conversation about a couple of great films. Mark, I'll start with you with Ryan Destiny and The Fire Inside. Tell us a little bit more about Ryan and the film.
Yeah, so this is a kind of an inspirational sports drama. Ryan plays Clarissa Shields, who won the gold medal for women's boxing at the 2012 Olympics in London. And co-stars Brian Tyree Henry as her coach. The film is the feature directing debut of Rachel Morrison, who's an Oscar-nominated cinematographer, and also the screenplay is written by Barry Jenkins, an Oscar winner, of course, for Moonlight. And actually for Ryan, who has, had some roles on television, been in a couple smaller films, this is really her first major film role. She's already been nominated at both the Gotham Awards and the Spirit Awards, and it's really pushing her forward. So it's a very exciting moment for her.
All right, and so I have to mention, I'm a Michigan man. There's a lot of Michigan ties here. You got Ryan Destiny from Detroit. You got Clarissa Shields from Flint, where I spent years doing radio there. So I know a lot of people who love her. They're championing her. So I feel personally invested to make sure I see this film and support this film. So I will do that for sure. Ivana, swing to you. We have Sean Baker, Mikey Madison, and Anora. Excited to hear more about this.
Yeah, well, like Ryan, this film really puts Mikey front and center. She stars as Annie, a sex worker who seems poised to give up that life when she marries a young Russian heir, a development that his family is not fond of. And that sort of triggers a series of crazy events that really puts their new relationship to the test. And for Mikey, we know her from Maybe Better Things, which was Pamela Adlon's series on FX, but she's had, smaller but memorable turns in films like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Scream. And this really seems like it'll put her on the map in a different way. This film is from Sean Baker, who is known for films like Tangerine and The Florida Project, which really shed a spotlight on people from marginalized communities. So this film has already won the top prize at Cannes Film Festival, and lots of people are talking about it.
All right, well, I'm excited to hear about it and see more about both these actors as well as the film. So we'll start with Mark and Ryan Destiny.
For the Envelope podcast and the Los Angeles Times, I'm Mark Olson, and I'm here today with Ryan Destiny from the film The Fire Inside. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I find that you're in such an interesting moment right now. You've been working for a good few years as a singer and on television, but I think a lot of movie audiences are going to be encountering you for the first time with The Fire Inside. So this seems like this moment must, on the one hand, seem like a culmination of a period of work, but it also is something totally new.
Yeah.
What does this moment feel like for you?
It's a very weird and surreal feeling, I think. I'm just trying to, stay present, I've been wanting this moment for such a long time, and now that it's finally here, I'm just trying to take it all in, It's something new happening every day, so I'm just shocked at different things and just really thankful.
What are some of the things that you've been surprised by so far?
I don't know, the different lists that come out, we were just talking about for the Hollywood Reporter or Elle or Variety, and my Gotham Award that came, or nomination that came, and just different things, stuff like that. It's just you hope and want for people to recognize your work in a way that resonates with people, but you just never know. So the fact that people are loving it and receiving it in this way is means so much to me.
And in particular, the road to getting here, just with The Fire Inside, so the film was delayed because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Then it switched companies, and I think it was delayed again because of the strikes.
Yeah.
In some ways, can you even believe that you're here, that the movie itself is finally done?
Not really. I'm trying to pinch myself every time because it's crazy. And I'm like, okay, we're almost to Christmas. And that's when it's official. It feels like, it's so crazy that it's finally happening in here, after all these years, like you just said. It's insane.
Tell me about that first delay. As I understand it, you were shooting for literally 2 days or something before the production had to shut down. That must have just been so difficult.
Yeah, and just like everyone during that time, you thought, okay, be back in 2 weeks, be back in a month, and it just kept going and going. And then when I got the final call of Rachel basically saying that it was dropped, basically, that was really heartbreaking. You know, that was like a complete down and out crying moment. And we just didn't really know what was next. So yeah, when that time was happening, it was pretty dark, I think.
But then I've heard Rachel Morrison, the director of the film, say that as hard as it is to admit that, you know, she feels like she grew as a director, she took some other jobs, she learned during that time. So in some ways it was a benefit.
Yeah.
You had more time to prepare for the role. Like
Yes.
looking back, do you feel like maybe you don't even know what the movie would have been like if you'd actually made it that first time around?
No, absolutely. Everything that happened is exactly what was supposed to happen, you know? So I don't regret it looking back. During, it was very, very difficult, very hard to wrap my head around on why, you know, things were happening that way. But looking back, it all makes so much sense. And I'm really thankful for that time. I grew as a human, as an actor, and it just helped for the actual work when it came back around. So yeah, I just like Rachel, I'm really thankful for it.
And now you and Clarissa Shields, you're both from Michigan. You're from Detroit. She's from Flint. Had you heard of her story before the project had come to you?
Not in a really big way. I think I maybe heard her name around, but I didn't really know. I was also an artsy kid, so I was very much so in the arts. I don't even think I watched the Olympics like that year, so I was completely out of the loop, you know? So the fact that not a lot of people heard about it, even a lot of people from Detroit felt the same way, was just insane, you know, and just not great to hear.
And so when the project came to you, what appealed to you about the role?
The people behind it, you know, I really would just think about working with Barry, I guess, in some way, but also thinking how, you know, I didn't really understand how that could actually happen. And so when this came around and I saw his name attached, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. Just really a fan of his work. And same with Rachel. And I really wanted a challenge. I really wanted something that was completely different than anything I'd ever done. So I think it was that appeal, you know, it was something that was so different for me to the point where I didn't even think I would get it. So I went into the audition just hoping for the best, but not really thinking, you know, that it would be something that was in the cards for me. And also knowing how competitive it would be to audition for that role. I think I was just like, I don't really know, but we're gonna see. So yeah.
Now, do you find when you're auditioning, when you have that mindset, does it like take the pressure off and make it any easier for you?
It does. It happens. I talk to a lot of my actor friends about it all the time. I think when you go into something with kind of lower expectations, it just helps overall. You're not overthinking every little thing. You're not doing the takes like 10 million times, you know, you just like go off of first instinct. And I think that really helps. And it helps you not have so much anxiety around like waiting for the call back and, you know, waiting to see what your team says. So I think, yeah, it really does help overall.
And then once you had the part, where did you start? Like, did you meet with Clarissa? Did you spend much time with her?
The first person I met with was Rachel, which was really great like lunch, I think, that we had. And then the next step, I believe, was meeting my boxing coach, Rob Sally, which was very interesting. He's like textbook boxing coach. And we really hit it off instantly. I didn't actually meet Clarissa until after she saw the film for the first time. And it was also perfect timing because we had kept wanting to meet, but things kept clashing. She would have to either, you know, be training for a fight like over in some other country while I was filming. I tried to go to one of her fights and then it got canceled. So it was always something that messed up. But when we did actually meet, it was literally perfect. And thankfully she loved the film right after she saw it too. So that all really helped.
You're playing this real life person. They're kind of right there. They're almost arranged. Like, was that was it hard for you to not be meeting her during that time?
Not necessarily, because I felt like I had so much to work with as far as, you know, she had a bunch of footage on YouTube of a lot of her fights that I would study. And she had an amazing documentary made after her, which really gives a front row seat into her life in a very intimate way with her family, all of the relationships with her mom, her siblings, Jason. And I am very thankful for that because not everyone has that much footage to work with, but it really, really helped me. And I kept that footage with me throughout the entire duration of filming. So things like that helped a lot. And also being able to talk to her whenever I needed to, pick up the phone or text to ask her any questions that I had. She was very, very open with me. So I'm thankful for that too.
And then tell me just about the training. Like I can only imagine what that must have been like.
It was a lot. It was really, really exhausting, but in a good way because I have never pushed myself that way ever in my life before, not especially not physically. So to see my body transform from day one until, actually starting was so crazy to me because I didn't know my body could do those things that it was doing. And I built my stamina up in a crazy way, and I was doing things that I just didn't realize I'd be able to do one day. So it was a really cool thing, and I'm glad that I caught it on like different videos and tapes that my coach would capture. So we really got to see step by step how it was moving forward. So that was really cool. But he did not hold back. He really would. He whipped me in the shape for sure. Yeah.
But then how do you think it impacted your performance? I want, the character of Clarissa, like she is moving forward all the time.
Yeah.
And that feels like something that would come from that training, from that sort of drive in the ring.
Yeah, that definitely helped. And my boxing coach, I say it all the time, he really went into this treating me like his fighter and not like an actor. And I think those little things really make all the difference when you're doing something like this and you need to be in that mindset like a fighter, like an athlete. And all of those things really, really helped me, and in ways that I don't even think I really realized. So I'm really thankful to have all of those things along the way that pushed me mentally and physically and emotionally. And he was a really big part of that.
And have your feelings about boxing changed at all through the course of making the movie?
I think I always had respect for boxing. I think I just didn't really have a true understanding of why someone would want to be a boxer. So I think I definitely walked away with just knowing and understanding a boxer's mindset more, from obviously playing Clarissa and then meeting a lot of boxers along the way as well, and understanding their story and why they started. And same with my boxing coach as well, asking him a bunch of questions like, why did you ever want to do this, So things like that, I think, changed the way, I looked at boxing in general, but I've always respected it.
Tell me a little bit about working just with Rachel Morrison. Obviously she's the first woman to be nominated as a cinematographer. This is her feature film debut as a director. So as much as this is something new for you, it's also something new for her. What was that dynamic like between the two of you?
I think you just said it. It was something that was new for both of us. And so we really went in hand, and she treated me like a partner along the way and really wanted my insight for a lot of the things that we had to make sure we implemented into just the world that we were in. Obviously being from Detroit, Michigan, it helped a lot that we grew up around that same time. So I did, understand a lot of things that culturally maybe she didn't, so things like that she really was super, super open with. And just as much as I wanted to learn from her, she was also learning from me. And I think that made a world of a difference. And she created such a safe space for me. And I'm so thankful for it because I think it made me a lot more vulnerable, going in and not as afraid of making mistakes and doing things wrong and going for things way harder. So I am forever thankful for her for seeing something in me, and she treated me like an equal. And that's something that I really appreciate, with everything that she's accomplished. It did not feel like she was ever looking down on me. So I think things like that helped. I think she's an amazing director, and I'm so excited for what she does next. So.
And now, was it a challenge to balance, in some sense, the the boxing, the fighting scenes from the sort of the dramatic and emotional scenes? I would imagine that it'd be easy to like kind of over focus on the boxing and like be so focused on that and like kind of forget that like you have to like tell the story and like
Yeah, I mean, going in, I don't think I realized how much it was to juggle. So I was learning along the way, and I'm really thankful for the stunt team that we had because there's only so many different ways that you can throw a punch, you know? So a lot of the fight sequences that we had to do and I had to learn, each of them were like dances. So I had to learn probably 5 or 6, maybe actually like 7 or 8 different types of dances. And they all started blending into each other in my brain. So I'm thankful because they were very, very organized in the way that they would do things to where I could just like pick it right back up, and whatever I learned and that I would forget, my stunt double would be right there to remind me of the certain movements that we had to do. So it was definitely a lot to juggle, and that's the first time anyone's ever asked you that. It was definitely it was a lot, and being able to also, I guess, just really have to stay in shape as I was filming too was something that was very, very hard. So I kept weights in my trailer. I stayed working out on the weekends, but also tried to rest as much as I could on the weekends too. So it was definitely a hard balance. I think I did my best. And I tried to wrap my head around it as much as I could, I guess.
you had mentioned Barry Jenkins, who wrote the screenplay. Was he very involved in the project, or what were your conversations with him like?
He was a lot more involved in the script itself, and I guess more early on into production, just with Rachel and Clarissa and making sure they got her story correct. And whatever she wanted in the script, they would make sure that they would put it in there. Whatever she wanted out, they would take it out. So he was a lot more involved in pre-production, I would say, and then always involved a call away with Rachel while we were filming. I think during that time he was also in his production with Mufasa as well. So yeah, but he was definitely there, and kudos to him. I don't know how he balanced all of those all of those things, but he's just such an incredible raw writer, I think, who really knows how to make things feel very grounded, and that's something that's very special to him. So I'm just thankful because his writing felt very freeing, and he allowed us to add whatever we wanted to, play with it however we wanted to. So yeah, he was really, really great throughout the entire process.
And this brings us to talking about Brian Tyree Henry, who plays Clarissa's boxing coach, Jesse Crutchfield. He just is such a warm and empathetic performer. Like, it's funny because on the one hand, I want to ask you, like, was it intimidating working with him? And on the other hand, that doesn't seem like the kind of person that he is.
Yeah, no, that's it, absolutely. I went into it scared. I was nervous because I loved him so much as an actor, but didn't really understand. He's a very off the grid type of person, so I didn't know really how he was gonna be. But he was so warm, you know, he was so inviting, and he really jumped straight into our production, I think straight from Atlanta. I think he had maybe like a week in between to get himself together. So it was just incredible to see how he works in his process. But yes, we hit it off instantly, and our chemistry, I guess, just really was natural, and it really built over the course of filming. So he's another person I'm really thankful for, and his entire, I don't know, just how he works is so mesmerizing to me. And he's someone who makes everyone else better around him as an actor. And he was an incredible leader too. So I learned a lot from him just by being a human, and then also by being an actor. And I'm just thankful. He's really taken me under his wing and just been an incredible support.
It's funny, I hear a lot of actors talk about seeing other actors on set, like the person who maybe is, you know, near the top of the call sheet, like that sort of idea of like being a leader on set. And that's something as like someone who I haven't spent a whole lot of time on movie sets, that like is a little foreign to me. Like,
Yeah.
what do you feel like you saw him doing, or what did you sort of take from him in just that like on-set persona that he felt you had?
You know, there were so many heavy scenes in our script that you would never know that from how we were when the cameras were off, you know? So I think the presence that he would bring is something that I admired a lot. He had such an infectious, positive spirit, and it put everyone else in good spirits. And I think that that's definitely the first step in just a great work day and work week, you know? So I think something like that is something that I really want to take away and hopefully continue to do, because I think it makes a world of a difference and, you know, puts everyone in a space of, you know, this is obviously work, but it's fun work, you know, and it's such a privilege to be able to do these types of things and these types of roles and be on set every day and live out our dreams. So it's no reason to be down or dark or you know, just too serious about everything. So he was the complete opposite of that, and we both fed off of each other with that type of energy. And yeah, it made really great work for it, because I think you can see it on the screen. So
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, because that dynamic between the characters of Clarissa and Jason is so specific.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that was essentially the same dynamic between you and Brian, or was it something different?
A little bit. I think we definitely felt more like brother and sister, versus Jason and Clarissa felt a bit more like daughter and father, you know? So maybe just that slight switch. But other than that, I was, you know, learning from him. And I guess Clarissa, a lot of the times, was learning from Jason. If you talk to Brian, he might say that, you know, he felt very open to even learning from me, but I think that that's him being an incredible actor, just learning from other actors in general every time he works with them. So I think it's a little mixture of things, but I definitely think that it helped in how we portrayed our characters, for sure.
Because as you said, there are so many just really intense scenes just between the two of you.
Yeah.
I'm thinking specifically of the hallway scene, like after Clarissa's lost her first fight and she comes back and she's, you know, she's upset with herself, she's upset
Yeah.
with him. Like, what was it like to have those kind of moments? Like also the scene where it's in like his kitchen, like it's almost like a breakup scene. So where you're like, you're really having it out there. That scene must have been very intense to do.
It was, but it's so weird. I wish I could explain it more, but me and Brian were very playful outside of that. You know, there were definitely times where we would take a moment after each take and just, you know, I guess stay to ourselves a little bit. But it wasn't something that was kind of overly done, if that makes sense. We didn't rehearse it a lot. It was something that I think we just went off of our first instincts and just really played into that and tried to make it feel as natural as possible. So again, without him, I don't know how I would have done it, but he's just an incredible scene partner. And that was one of my favorite scenes to do, because we really were just going back and forth with each other and feeding off of each other's energy. So it was really great.
And what does it mean to you that now that the movie's coming out, that if nothing else, so many more people are learning Clarissa's story and I think are going to know more about her?
It means literally everything. I think the first time that I watched the movie, I was looking for different things that I kind of wanted to just do better. You know, I was just nitpicking myself.
Yeah.
The second time, it really hit me on how incredible her story is and how much this means to people and to her, and how much it's needed. You know, her story is so inspiring and incredible, and I literally cried because it really touched me in a way that made me see it just from a different standpoint, and just seeing the bigger picture of what it's really about. And it's about people seeing her story, being inspired, respecting her journey, respecting other women athletes as well, and what they have to go through. So I think it's so incredible, and I'm really, really excited for her and for people to get to know her even more.
And now to step back from the movie just a little bit, I want to ask you about kind of your career up until this point. You began as a singer, and was acting something that you always wanted to be doing, or like how did that sort of switch happen?
I think it was, but not in a way where it was very, very clear to me. I was someone who kind of had singing singing and acting go hand in hand. I loved musicals growing up, so I loved being able to sing songs and say the lines as I was watching them. So I think it was a little bit of both, of me always wanting and being curious about both fields. But I don't think I realized that I really wanted to do it maybe until I was a teenager. And I think as you keep learning and keep getting different jobs, I started doing things as, a background actor, an extra, a stand-in. And I think as you grow and you keep getting these like little parts and then a bigger part, that you just fall more in love with it. And I also was in a youth theater back in my hometown, Detroit, and that is also where I fell in love with just that world in general. A lot of my teachers and my coaches are very inspiring, and the way that they open a lot of the kids' lives up by being creative and expressing their creativity and just sharing that and making sure that we were very open and free as well was something that I think really built me as a performer without even knowing it then at that young age. But I always gravitated towards it. I always loved it. And yeah, they always went hand in hand. So
And then being cast on something like Star must have felt like a great way to sort of like bridge those two worlds.
yes, Star was really fun because I watched Glee growing up. So I really loved the idea of Glee. Didn't realize that years later I'd be on a Fox show that also was about singing and dancing and acting. So it was very surreal for me during that time. I absolutely loved it, and I loved being able to merge all of the things that I loved into one project. I hope that I can do it again one day because it really is really fun.
You would want to do a musical?
I think so. I definitely don't know which one I'd fit into, but I think it's such a fun world. And yeah, I love singing so much, so that'd be cool.
And then what is it like for you now with The Fire Inside, like after all these years of work finally coming out? But do you have some sense of like what you want next?
I think I'm still figuring it out. I know for sure whatever it is, I want to continue to work on things that have incredible people behind it. I continuously say that I'm so proud of The Fire Inside, and it's probably the most proud I've ever been of any project that I've been a part of, and I love that feeling. So if I could continue to feel like that, that would be a really big blessing, So I think it really starts with the people behind it and how much care that they put into it. I think it always shows in the work, and no matter how it's received from other people, if you walk away feeling proud about it, I think that that's what matters the most. So I want to go into the next project with that mindset. Yeah.
Well, certainly The Fire Inside is a deeply inspiring movie, and your performance in it is just so phenomenal.
Thank you.
Ryan Destiny, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
After the break, Sean Baker and Mikey Madison from Anora.
Sean and Mikey, thanks so much for being here.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
I mean, the reception of the film has been overwhelming. When it premiered at Cannes, I mean, the critics raved about the film and your performance. It won the festival's top prize. And since its October release, the raves have continued. Mikey, how are you processing this moment? Like, how are you feeling this level of attention?
I don't know. It's not something that I've really noticed a big shift in necessarily, but I'm also not someone who's like who pays attention to like online chatter and things like that. I'm just not really on the internet, so I think I keep myself sort of blind to some of it. Yeah.
In what ways does your life feel different? Are you being asked to do more shoots or things like that? Like, how does it feel like there has been a switch, if at all?
I mean, I've noticed some small changes, I think. One of them is every single person and their mother has reached out to me in some way, which has been interesting. I'm not sure if I like that part of it, though.
Why?
I don't know. I think some of it doesn't feel super genuine, like old friends coming out of the woodwork, like ex-boyfriends reaching out to me. Okay, you wanna grab a coffee or something? I'm like, oh, because you've seen me on billboards? Is that why you're, right. I don't know.
Does it feel any different for you with each film that comes out in succession?
A little bit. I think the awareness of my films have grown with each one. This one seems to be, Neon's doing an amazing job here in the States,
Right.
getting the film out there and getting exposure. So yeah, this one definitely seems a little bit bigger in terms of just awareness.
Well, let's talk about the genesis of where this story came from. I mean, you have long said that you were interested in sort of the Brooklyn neighborhoods of Brighton Beach and Coney Island, and the stories of Russian Americans living there. How did that fascination evolve into the story of Anora?
I wanted to return to New York. I made 2 features in New York back in the aughts, and it was actually after this one I made called Prince of Broadway, where I thought I was going to tell another New York story at that point. And my actor, Karan Karagulian, who's in Anora, he plays Toros. He's been in all of my films, and he has a connection to that neighborhood. I mean, he's Armenian American, but came over after the fall of the Soviet Union, basically kind of landed in that neighborhood, was selling caviar on the corners of Brighton Beach Boulevard just to survive. Had a lot of stories about that area, and then married a Russian American. His wife, Lana, is actually in the movie playing his wife in the church scene. So has that connection, has a lot of stories. And so it was something that we were exploring for a very long time. It was probably we were thinking it might be a Russian gangster story. We didn't know. I wasn't really keen on going there because it's kind of been done many a times. And we put it on the back burner saying someday we'll figure this out. And well, about 15 years later we did. And it was really when I decided at that point, I had been exploring sex work in my other films. And so I realized that I wanted a sex worker as the main protagonist of this film. And just building on this idea of this idea I had of this young woman who realizes a little too late that she married the wrong man. And so we applied that to that world, and it finally all came together.
How did you land on the name Anora? I love the name.
I do too, and I think that's when I was looking for a name, I literally looked at names from the Slavic region, and I started on A, and I worked my way down. I didn't even make it to B. Anora has a beautiful. It rolls off the tongue. It just sounds. It's nice sounding to the ears, but also, yeah. And also the meaning has different meanings from, in different cultures. And I think they all apply to the Annie character. So meanings ranging from honor to light and bright. And so I just fell in love with it.
Was there a backup?
No, there was never a backup.
There's
never a backup.
You did not have to audition for this role. This happened because, Sean, you had seen her in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Scream. Talk to me about what seeing her performances in those films, what clicked for you that she would be right for this role, that she would be the perfect Annie.
It was a combination of those 2 performances. They're both intense. They're obviously showed that she can go to extremes. I knew Annie was going to be doing that, so that spoke to me. But also in Scream, let's say at least for the first 3/4 of the film before it's revealed who she is. I don't want to give any spoilers away, but she's Ghostface Killer. But before that reveal, she's playing a young adult with sass and full of a great sense of humor, and I just I knew it in that moment. I cast my own films, so it's something was telling me she was right. We knew in the theater, actually. Watching Scream, I turned to my wife and producer Samantha, and I said, we're calling her agent the minute we step out of the theater. So it was done. It was a done deal at that point. Now, when we met over coffee, I quickly realized that Mikey was not in any way typecast, very different from the roles she had played.
But that's serial.
But also a little more reserved. And I think that gave me even more confidence because I was like, okay, those are performances that, and I see range and I see transformation, and that's everything. So I offered her the role right over that coffee meeting.
When you get told by your agent or your manager, Sean wants to meet with you, tell me what that ignites in you.
Well, I was woken up by the phone call, and at the time, I was like, whenever I would see UTA come up on my phone. I knew it was a conference call, which is usually something really good or fun or exciting. And so I answered it, and they were extremely excited and were like, he wants to meet you. He wants to offer you a role. And so in a couple days, you guys are going to meet. And are you familiar with his work? Have you seen his films before? And I think I was shocked or taken aback. Part of me was like, I feel like this is still an audition of some kind. So I went into the meeting prepared to audition if I had to at that moment. And he offered me the role then and there. But then that insecure part of me at the time was like, I want to just triple check again. And so I asked my manager to ask again if I had the role.
Remember that.
In what way were you prepared to audition? Were you going to do the voice? How were you prepared to prove it?
No, I didn't know anything about the character at the time. I knew like very little, like a very loose synopsis that's different than what the film is now. But just if he had asked me to do something, I meant to prepared myself to just be open to anything that happens. But I didn't have to do any of that. It was very easy.
Because how do you approach it? Like you said, you were going off her performances, but when you meet with an actor, what are you looking for that will signal to you this is a right fit, like for a work collaboration?
You have to connect. You definitely have to be on the same page. I have to say that one thing, no matter who the actor is, whether it's like a first timer that I'm interested in using or somebody like Mikey with years of experience and training, I look for enthusiasm. They have to be returning the enthusiasm to you. And if not, things could go wrong that's the first thing I look for. But then I think this meeting also proved to me that Mikey was really down for doing the work. I mean, she said, I can get a dialect coach to work on this accent. I'll do whatever training that's required. So I saw that she was already expressing like real enthusiasm and a real desire to take this thing seriously and to get this, and to tackle this role with everything she had. So that's really it. And then, of course, we also, I think, bonded on in terms of our taste of the same movies, and I think sense of humor. So it was all there. Yeah.
Mikey, you sort of got your sort of breakthrough role on Better Things, which is Pamela Adlon's series that she created, starred in, directed mostly. You've talked about how that was a film school for you of sorts. Like, how did that prepare you for taking on something like this? I mean, that was very grounded, felt very real, that show. How did it prepare you for this?
Well, it was my first real job. I had done some really small independent work, like student film type things beforehand, but it was my introduction into acting and what it was like to create television and be in front of the camera. It was my first everything, and so I think I was able to create a base for what it was like to be an actress and make films, and so I learned a little bit of everything, and I think over the course of 5 seasons, I was also able to grow with my character too, and continue to evolve and find new things to learn. So I think it was just, I was able to cut my teeth on it.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about the prep that went into playing Annie. How soon after you got the reassurance that you really did have this role did the prep work begin for you? I mean, you talked to sex workers, you watched documentaries, read memoirs. I heard about the Pinterest boards and, the dance training or everything that went into it for you. How soon did you start all that?
Pretty much waited to heavily dive into anything until I got the script, because I still knew very little about the character. I didn't have a complete grasp of like who she is or how I could take the script and bring her to life. And so I did like little things. I took like a pole class, I think, after Sean told me like that she's a dancer. And from that pole class, I was able to understand how difficult it was going to be. And it gave me an idea of how much preparation I would need, possibly, going into it. And then once I got the script, I was able to dive in a lot more.
Yeah, I should mention that first meeting, there was no screenplay. It was just the idea in my head. And so when I pitched this to her, and I said, if you want the role, now I'm going to go and write the screenplay. And so that's what I did. It took about a year to write it. And as a screenwriter, it was really wonderful to have to precast Mikey, because I was able to see her face while fleshing this character out. And so, yeah, it took about a year. But I think we shared it with you. Well, we shared it with you, and then I guess as we were prepping for production in development, starting to go to New York and all of that, that's when Mikey took on everything. So it was like probably 4 months before production, and there was intensive prep.
What do you remember about that first day on set, embodying Annie for the first time and finding your emotions and settling into her?
I think I had done so much preparation beforehand, like physical, emotional preparation, dialect and language. And so putting the costume on, being in hair and makeup for the first time, I felt like things fell into place a bit more. But the first day of shooting for me is always the worst in some ways, because I'm like, okay, I guess this is it. The first scene that we shoot is going to set the tone for who this person is. And so I remember feeling a bit shaky in the dialect at first, and then Sean was like, okay, let's take it down 3 notches. And I think we were able to get to a place where it was really fine-tuned and perfect. And so after that, I think I felt more into the character. But we started off gently, I think, jumping into... I was so nervous, though. Of course, yeah.
I think it's always important to have a very relaxed first day. You almost want to be shooting stuff that may not even make it to the final cut. It's just stuff to get everybody comfortable. So I often think of it as like B-roll that I'm shooting on that first day. And historically, I have dropped the first shot of every single movie I've done. Every first take of every film has been lost. So I know that it's going to be, us basically getting going. Yeah. But I do remember that moment that Mikey just said. We were actually we were shooting not even, the whole cast wasn't even in town. It's on the movie. But it was the first time that we were all seeing you and Karin and Vache, I believe. We were underneath the train tracks on Brighton Beach Boulevard. Everybody was in costume and makeup. We were just rolling some random stuff, and it was the first time that we were able to see everybody in the environment be their characters, and it was, I have to say, extremely exciting because we got those first, and I just had Mikey improvise a little bit, just basically chewing out the 2 Armenian henchmen about. Not like, come on, let's go find this guy. It was just riffing about finding a bond. And it gave me an incredible amount of confidence. Seeing it in the monitor, it felt like it was all coming together.
When I talk to actors, or when you hear actors talk about process or finding their way into the character, it's often with the clothes that they're wearing. And I found that you had a interesting statement. It was about how you observed the nudity as your costume. And I wonder if you could elaborate on that, like taking that frame of mind with Annie.
Well, Annie is a sex worker, and so naturally nudity is part of what she does. And I think that when she goes to work, there is a version of herself that she puts on and presents forward. I think she's playing some kind of caricature of herself in those moments. And so to her, I think that she's completely comfortable. She's presenting a very confident version of herself. And she's, in a strip club or in a private bedroom, and so she was comfortable. And to me, I felt the same way, like it was my job. I never felt really like I was naked, to be honest. I was extremely comfortable, which I remember going into shooting the first scene where there would be some nudity, and I'd never done that before, and I was like, I wonder what this is going to be like. Like, this will be interesting, I guess, just to not have clothes on, I don't know. And nobody cared, and it was, I don't know, it was very relaxing in a way, because I was like, okay, we're all approaching it like this is a job. And it is. It's a job for me as an actress, and also for Annie as a character.
What work do you do to make sure like the people on your set are feeling safe or comfortable for moments like that?
Yeah, well, it's really about communication. And I always saw these as instead of sex scenes, sex shots that were very calculated and, thought out, very much so before production. So we would discuss exactly how she was shot and what Mikey and Mark would want on set. If they wanted a intimacy coordinator, they could have one. But I think we were just so in sync by the time we got to production that it was a very casual thing. Now I have my my wife and producer Samantha Kwan present, and being a producer myself, safety and the comfort level of my actors are the number one priority. So, it's just done in quite a clinical way. It's just like we get the shot and move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The tagline to the movie is that this is a love story, but there's so many elements that you get to play with in this film. I mean, there's like slapstick comedy, there's a little bit of thriller component, a road trip. Midway through the film, there's this, a brawl out scene from Mikey with the henchmen of Yvonne's Russian billionaire parents. And I wonder what it was like taking on the physicality of her in that way versus some of the other scenes you were doing in the film. Like, she really goes at it in these scenes with these men. How was it to take her on in that way?
Well, we always had talked about her being very scrappy. I think that she is someone she's a fighter in so many different ways, like emotionally and physically. But also in that moment, she doesn't know what's going to happen to her. Like, these people have burst into her marital home and are trying to ruin her life, and she doesn't know if they're gonna kill her or they're gonna ruin her marriage, and so she's fighting tooth and nail to get out of there and then to save her marriage and her life that she's earned and created. So in terms of the physicality, I think that we were all on the same page that we could try to push it as far as possible. And I think that was necessary too. You can't go into those scenes half-assed. I think I had to fully fight as hard as I possibly could for it to work. And so, so I think that, we had done everything kind of half speed, did quite a bit of rehearsals, choreographing those scenes, and then we jumped into it for the first take, and I think we shot it chronologically, so the first take set the tone for the intensity and how to build it and arc it so that it wasn't repetitive.
Your films often center on people or communities on the fringes, and, class disparity comes into focus. These are people maybe chasing the American dream but don't have access to it and are finding their own ways to get to it. And I'm curious, like, how do you, does the way you approach your characters and how they go about that shift any depending on the political climate? Like, not overtly, but that it looms over. Like, do you think about that when writing these stories?
Yes, I do. How overtly I'm going to tackle it is really depending on the film and the time. It's hard not to tackle class, though. In any era, in the last, all of my films have pretty much tackled it because it's impossible to avoid. I mean, especially with our growing class divide, it would be almost irresponsible not to cover it. So I've seen that grow with my films, actually. There has been, I guess you could say, a conscious choice actually not to be overtly political. And I'll tell you why. It's not because I don't want to tackle these subjects. I'm tackling them. But I don't want to preach, because I feel that we're already so incredibly divided as a country that if I start preaching my politics, I'm going to essentially alienate 50% of the population. And I think that art is about bringing people together and sparking discussion. And I realized when I made Florida Project that the reactions were extreme, but in a very interesting way, because I had the hard right, the extreme right liking the movie, and the extreme left liking the movie. And so that made me think, oh, okay, that means we presented this story and the politics in the story in an objective enough way where it allowed, it was speaking to both sides, and perhaps even opening up the eyes of both sides, and meaning perhaps having them think differently about it, or maybe even applying their own politics to these stories. I don't know, but I did appreciate the fact that I had both sides talking about it. So it was from Florida Project on that I said, this is how I'm going to do it, and I'm going to be conscious of it.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, you sort of got into film in your youth, watching monster films, and whether Star Wars or whatever blockbuster films, especially when you went to NYU, that was probably maybe in some way a goal. When did you become conscious of, I want to focus on?
I think I fell in love with world cinema while I was at NYU undergrad. So it was those 4 years. It had more to do with just living in New York City than NYU itself. I mean, this is the proximity to repertory theaters, to essentially like the best video stores at the time, access to, this was pre-internet, so it was access to titles that I could never see before. And I think that I started to gravitate towards like Italian neorealism, British social realism, and they tackle politics. And I love the way they tackle politics. So I think that was where I saw, oh, okay, you could be making statements with these movies as well, at the same time tackling human stories and universal themes. And so it was really after 9/11, and we were in extremely political times, right? That I made that film Take Out, which was my first, I think, exploration of something outside of my world, and focusing on, the present day America.
The way Anora ends is something that has generated a lot of discussion. It's like a tender, heartbreaking moment. The fairy tale has sort of come crashing down. Like Annie's back to like being a pumpkin, so to speak, and she's trying to figure out, like, I guess, what happens next. And I know you said that was maybe one of the hardest scenes for you, intimacy-wise. Like, you felt more exposed in that moment, doing that scene, because it's just so, you can feel the uncertainty there in a way. When did that become clear to you? Did it feel hard in the moment or in the lead up to it? When did you sort of feel like this seems harder than the rest of the stuff I've done for this film?
Well, I think it was just the pressure that I put on myself for that particular scene, because it's such an important scene for the character and for the film. And so it was one of those scenes that I was anticipating and kind of dreading in some way. And there was so much build up to that scene too. Like trying to shoot it for multiple days and then having something go wrong, like the lighting or the snow, or it was too crowded of a street. And so finally on the day when we got there, I almost felt like numb in a sense. Like I had sort of given up in this weird way, because I was like, I'm never going to get this scene right, and which is so dramatic of me.
Which every director fears, right?
Yeah, I certainly didn't pick that up, but because I was freaking out inside, so that's interesting to hear.
But there was a place that I needed to get to emotionally, that Annie was constantly covering up any vulnerability or emotion. She wasn't letting it be shown. She didn't want anyone to see her like that. And so I found myself in a similar headspace while I was shooting, like not wanting to be outwardly emotional, keeping my cards close to my chest. And so I think that that's one of the reasons why I was sort of dreading that scene, because usually I'm just an emotional person. Like I cry when I'm happy, when I'm sad, overwhelmed, really anything. And I was like, why does this feel so difficult? Why do I feel like I'm on the verge of tears, but like nothing is coming out? Like I just wanted that release for her. And so I had a couple of conversations with Sammy Kwan, our producer, and talking about the character and the scene, and everyone's sitting in the car waiting for us. And I'm like, I feel like I need to ground myself in a different way. I need to like let go of any idea I had of what I wanted the scene to be and let it just be what it is, because I don't think that you can really pre-plan a scene like that. Of like, oh, at this moment, this happens and this and this. I needed to just be honest to what my emotions are at the moment, in that moment, because I think once you start pushing for some big emotion that's not there is when you lose the audience and the character. And so I was like, I need something to kind of just like, I don't know, twist the knife a little bit deeper, like open up some kind of emotionality that I didn't have before. And so we all did that. Sean was in the backseat of the car.
Breaking the fourth wall there, but.
Well, but no, as I said, it makes it very intimate in a way, because it's like the creator of this story, and then these two characters, we're all together in that last moment, and I think it creates an intimacy within the film. But I pulled something out of my back pocket, and we were able to sort of ground ourselves and get to a place where we could.
You're not going to tell me what you pulled, huh?
Well, no, sometimes I feel embarrassed talking about it, because it's like, I think some actors have things that they think about or listen to, or that they have in their repertoire of like emotional things to sort of open you up in a different way. And so it was like very embarrassing in a way to share that with Sean and Yura, but also I think was needed, because then we were all sort of in this like raw, vulnerable place.
Before I let you go, I know you don't want to give your thoughts on what happens or the interpretation you have for it, but is there a reading of the ending that you found interesting that other people have had?
Yeah. I receive a lot of messages, and lately I've been doing a lot of Q&As, and I've had people come up to me afterwards and express and share what they feel. And what I've found, which has been just the most, I think, rewarding, is when we have actual sex workers coming up afterwards and saying that, and I won't tell you exactly what they've said, but the fact that that the film in general, they are being seen through the movie, and I think that's one of the reasons we made this film, and that's for me the most rewarding thing. Regarding the ending specifically, yes, people have had a lot of different interpretations. Some have been way out there. And I'm like, no, that's definitely not what's happening. I can tell you that. But yeah, but for the most part, I think that it is doing what it's supposed to do, and that's allowing audiences to sort of write their own ending in a way. And I think that also, and this is a lot to do with Mikey's wonderful performance, I think people are really connecting with the Annie character, and they want to know more. They want to be with her after this film. They want to know she's all right. They want to, so there's been a lot of positive writing for the end of what the epilogue could possibly be. And that's nice too. That's really nice to hear from people who are like, I love Annie so much, and I hope this happens to her.
Could be your first sequel. Sorry. Well, thank you both so much for taking the time. Really, congratulations on the film.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, that's it. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to tune in next week when we'll have Malcolm and John David Washington from The Piano Lesson and Justin Kuritzkis from Challengers and Queer.